All right. Probably mention that I'm not actually going to be doing anything this video or making any progress in the game whatsoever. Or at least that's what I plan to do. I may actually do something, but I ultimately don't think so. Still don't really know why I'm gonna title this video yet, but basically what I'm gonna do is just kind of go over the series up until this point and what I plan to do for the future, because I'm really at a crossroads right now between sort of three parts of this series. Because this series, as of now, I'd say, is ultimately divided into three parts basically. The first part of the series was ultimately my initial run through or playthrough. That was from like summer of 2018 till like earlier this year. And that was my first run playthrough. That was when I wasn't really, you know, paying, I wouldn't say paying attention, but more so just kind of running through on my own, not really doing any outside research. That was my initial party with my starter. Well, I still had Delta Scyther and Gardevoir, and then Delta Lombre, Delta Mischievous, Delta Budu. I was playing on normal, still playing on set, but ultimately playing on normal as opposed to hard. And then, yeah, that was kind of, I'd say, like my more ignorant run. I really wasn't doing any outside research. I mean, I didn't even look at the wiki once. I didn't even know it existed at the time. So that's sort of the first part to this series, or sort of, I guess, yeah, mainly the Insurgence series. I guess that's what I'll call it. The second part was, because in case you didn't know, what happened with the first part was, the first part was actually playing on Mac, which this game really isn't designed for, but it was designed for an older version of Mac or whatnot. So when I updated it, I ultimately lost all the data. And then from that point on, I realized either I had to make a completely new runner playthrough on a differing device or just kind of drop the series. And I ultimately went with the former, starting an entirely new run on a different device, which is what I'm recording on right now, which is a Windows. So, and that's what the game's designed for. So if there's like updates, I can update it. There shouldn't be any problems with that. Or definitely not problems that I've had earlier. In fact, I really haven't had any problems with crashes. I've only had one crash this whole game. But yeah, so that's kind of the first part, and sort of the reason behind its end and start for this new part, which is the second part. The second part has been the second runner playthrough, which I started earlier this year as well, which instead of playing on normal set mode, I played on hard set mode. I decided I could either try and replicate the first runner playthrough as much as possible, but I realized that ultimately, I'll never be able to recreate fully, especially now that I can't get Delta Mischievous. So I realized instead what I should do is try something. I'll keep it similar but different at the same time. That's ultimately my rationale behind trying to go on hard mode and then ultimately doing a lot of research into the game. Like, I've had the wiki pulled up pretty much the whole time I've been playing, or actually recording the second part, the second runner playthrough of this. But yeah, ultimately that was sort of the reasoning behind starting the second runner playthrough, as opposed to like kind of why I needed to end the first one. And then that, like I said, that was from earlier until this year. It had my starter. Well, actually, I can just straight up pull up my party. It had my starter, Delta Scyther, Delta Gardevoir. Those were the same, but ultimately the different ones are Delta Muck, Delta Quagsire, and then it evolved Delta Lombre into Delta Ludicolo. And I'm actually still using Crobat, and I still plan to use it against Harmony, who's the fourth gym leader or whatnot. So yeah, ultimately there's that. I've been really grinding it out, because obviously I made it all the way back to where the first series, or the first runner playthrough ended, in which the first runner playthrough took me about 2 years, and this one, the second runner playthrough, took me about 2 months. So the amount of the progress I made in 2 years, I've been able to replicate it in 2 months, which that's a really good pacing. Unfortunately, it'll slow like as we progress. But yeah, that's basically sort of motivation and reasoning behind the second runner playthrough. That ultimately I decided I'd play it on a different device, and as opposed to try and replicate it, keep it similar but slightly different at the same time. That's why I decided to play on hard set as opposed to normal set. Obviously not doing a randomizer or Nuzlocke or something along those lines. But yeah, ultimately kind of doing what I can. Obviously, I still went with mostly deltas, but obviously I still have a normal Pokemon on my team, the Crobat. Yeah, I was basically playing through up until this point where the first runner playthrough ended, in which, again, the time span to get to here was about 2 months for the second runner playthrough as opposed to 2 years for the first runner playthrough, which, like I said, that's pretty good time. But yeah, that's kind of the end of the second runner playthrough. Now, and that's part 2 of sort of this series. Part 1 being the first runner playthrough, part 2 being the second runner playthrough. Now we're moving on to kind of part 3, where, because for part 2 at least, the second runner playthrough, I knew everything I knew everything that would happen while I was playing because I've already played through it before. So like nothing was really a surprise to me. Like nothing like caught me off guard. Nothing was new. But now that I've reached where I ended off for the first runner playthrough, everything beyond this point is new. I mean, I'm gonna avoid looking at the wiki actually, because I tried to look at the next route and I saw this will actually be a kind of a spoiler, but I saw one of the cultists' name and then immediately clicked out of the wiki because I don't want to know what interaction we'll have further into the game than where I am currently or whatnot. So yeah, basically from here on out, I don't know anything that's going to happen. It's entirely new to me. Like I've surpassed the moment, or I've surpassed where I ended off with the first runner playthrough. So this is ultimately part 3. This is going to be part 3 of the series. Everything from here on out, ultimately, because I have first off, I won't be constantly looking at the wiki. Well, I guess that's second off. First off, I don't know what's going to happen from here on out. Like I've said, because this is where this just now, right? Just as soon as I entered the city, I surpassed where I ended off on the first runner playthrough. And then I don't know what's going to happen in the future. And then that's what's first off. And second off, I'm not going to look at the wiki or look at what I'll do is I'll finish whatever sort of route or city we're in, finish doing what I need to there, and then look back at the wiki as opposed to looking ahead. Because like I said, I looked ahead to the next route past Sanaa City, saw a cultist's name, and then clicked out because I didn't want any spoilers. Because everything beyond here is new to me. It's new information. I don't know what's going to happen. Everything we did prior, I already knew of, up until that battle with Audrey. But now, I don't know what's going to happen. This is entirely new to me. I mean, this really is just, I guess, now I'm really starting to play this game. I'm really starting to get into this game now because it's entirely new. There's nothing from beyond this point that I would be aware of or that I would have previous knowledge of. So, yeah, that's kind of the third part and the reasoning behind it. So, because it really is just, this series really is kind of split into 3 parts. The first part being the first runner playthrough, the second part being the second runner playthrough, and then the third part ultimately being the second runner playthrough beyond the point of where I ended the first runner playthrough to where everything everything from here on out is new information. Also, I guess before I end this video, I want to show something because I mentioned this earlier, but ultimately there is a very suspicious, or I should say there is a NPC, because that's what they are, that ultimately they ultimately say something very, very suspicious. They're not really gonna, this person, I think he's in every single Pokemon, but whoever's in the bottom right corner of all the Pokemalls or whatnot, which are the Pokemon centers in the city, but this is what he says. Tides are changing in the Torn region, friend. For good or for bad, I can't say. But I'll give you this advice, be careful. And then that's all he says. And he said that in the previous Pokemalls as well. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's ultimately just kind of foreshadowing what's about to happen. Because he's been saying that since the first Pokemon. But, yeah, that's a nice sort of addition to the game. That just sort of emphasizes, despite really, we haven't really seen much sort of plot yet. The main plot we've seen up until this point was ultimately that Yern is actually the leader of the Sky Calling. Really nothing more. Like, that's pretty much the only sort of plot twist we've had so far. But ultimately, we know there's going to be more. In fact, with the recent conversation between Yern and Persephone, Yern revealed that, you know, he knows where the first augur got the crystal, or at least has an idea, and that ultimately, like that NPC said, there's a torn wide conspiracy that could be bigger than he ever imagined before. So ultimately, at this point, it's just sort of foreshadowing that something big is about to happen. We don't know what it is. I mean, it still goes along with my theory of the prophecy referring to the first augur, and that the first augur faked his death so that Yern wouldn't suspect anything, and so that ultimately he could really control things from behind the scenes as the secret leader of the Abyssal Cult. And then ultimately that would fulfill the prophecy, as he would be betraying his friends, or what friends is in the region, and then joining up with the Abyssal Cult and secretly consolidating power beneath him or something. I don't know, that's just my theory of what the prophecy is and who it's referring to, because ultimately that's also another big plot point we've learned so far, that ultimately the prophecy, like we said, is broken down to 3 parts. 1, there will be a hero chosen by one of the 3, I don't even think it mentioned the 3 mystic Pokemon, but just a mystic Pokemon in general. So Nora can be a part of that bag. 2, that the hero would ultimately go on undefeated in the region against the cults and whatnot. And then 3, ultimately the hero would betray their friends and join the Infernal Cult, which that's ultimately the kicker there. I think that's referring to the first author, and he already is the secret leader of the Infernal Cult. But I mean, again, we don't know. That's just theorizing. So I guess, yeah, that is the second main plot point we've had this game. The first being that, or plot twist. The first being that Yern was actually the leader of the Sky Cult this whole time, and 2, that ultimately the prophecy states that the one who's supposed to defeat the cultists will ultimately join up with the Infernal Cult instead, which is really, because then immediately after that, the Oracle just like dipped. He didn't provide any more information after that. So yeah, ultimately that was a shock, but yeah. So I guess I should explain from here on out, because I did mention splitting the series into 3 parts, or how it's effectively split into 3 parts and what they each are. And then I showed the trainer and kind of talked about the plot twists and plot points that have already been made. But yeah, so now I'll talk about the series moving forward. So basically, I guess pretty much, because it's all new information, or everything from this point on is new to me. So ultimately what I'll do, I think, is I'll go back to recording like I did for the first runner playthrough, where I'd basically record everything as opposed to important like parts to the game or whatnot, because again, I don't want to record only important parts to the game, because then it'll all be surprise interactions and whatnot, because I wouldn't see it coming. But yeah, ultimately I'll just record everything, except obviously if I need to like train, or if I need to like do stuff outside of like progression through the story. But yeah, basically I'll go back to how I did it for the first runner playthrough, and ultimately just record everything, I think. And I'm not sure if I'm going to name this like part. I know I'm going to name this part differently, or what I'm recording currently, but for the future parts and whatnot, I'm not sure if I'm really going to name them any differently. I think I'll just keep it as like a continuation of the second runner playthrough, despite being kind of a different part within the series, being part 3 as opposed to part 2. Because obviously, like I said, everything from here on out is new to me. This is where I left off with the first runner playthrough. I don't know anything else about the game beyond, well, I have had a couple of spoilers, but I'm not going to relay them. I don't know how the spoilers play out, so that'll still be interesting, but yeah, I'm not going to say anything, but yeah, I think I'm going to end this here. This is kind of, I think I have an idea of what I want to name this video, but yeah, it's basically just breaking down what has happened, what will happen, because we really are at a crossroads for this series right here, for the Insurgence recordings or whatnot. But yeah, and I've decided that. Oh, hold on. Jeez. And I've decided that I actually will record Insurgents throughout the summer. I was thinking maybe I get to this point where I ended off the first runner playthrough and then stop recording because I'm kind of busy and I won't have time to record a lot. And I was thinking maybe I record DDLC mods or something. But ultimately, I think I'd rather record this because what I've been saying was that DDLC mods, that's more of a personal goal where it's like, okay, I have this mods list that I want to finish. Ultimately, outside of that, there's like a ton more stuff that I could ultimately do that I will never have time to do. But this is just about finishing the game, which I think I can do if I continue recording or whatnot. So, yeah, I ultimately think that's what it comes down to. I'm going to end it here. Yeah, this was slightly different, but where we pick off of in part 3 ultimately of the series or whatnot from this crossroads, we will be battling the trainers in the gym, and I'm not sure how many there are. I don't even know how the gym's like format or layout is, but and then ultimately we'll battle the gym leaders. So, yep, guess that's it for this part. See you in the next one.